calling to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Kill Devil Hills Board of Commissioners. Thank you all for your patience. You're running in the door at the last minute. Long commute from down in Salvo. Beautiful sunset tonight. We'll take that part of it. As we get started, let's start off with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And as we go into our moment of silence, please keep Public Services worker Darlene Robinson and her family in your thoughts. Her father has recently passed away. And also, as we observe Veterans Day this week as it's coming up, please keep all of your veteran friends and relatives in your mind. And thank them for their active duty and all the folks that served in the past for serving their country all around the globe. So if you would, please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me all right? I was challenging with this piece of cloth. Getting right into it, we have an agenda in front of you, folks. We've had it since last week. So let me know what you think and if you'd like to go forward with the agenda.
Make a motion, we approve the agenda as presented.
Mayor, I'll second that. We've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. First item on our agenda, of course, is a public hearing, and I'll let Casey do the legalese on the way in.
Thank you, Mayor. There will be a public hearing tonight, and the following rules of procedure are going to apply to this hearing. A public notice of the hearing was published in the newspaper and posted on the town bulletin boards in accordance with statutory requirements for the subject matter. A copy of the notice has also been filed with the town clerk for entry into the official record of the hearing. The clerk will be recording all oral comments in a concise and brief manner. The written statement shall be recorded in a similar manner and made part of the record of the hearing and shall be submitted in full to the town clerk. Citizens have been invited to submit public comment via email as well at info@kdhnc.com. Any electronic submission shall be included in the hearing's record. Please, if speaking, limit your comments to matters that are relevant to the issue and to a time period of 3 minutes. A 5-minute exception will be made if there is a spokesperson for a group or if your statement has been submitted in writing to the clerk. All speakers, we ask that you come forward to the microphone so that your statement can be taped. There will be no debates here, and also please identify yourself and your address when coming forward. The public hearing will now please come to order, and this hearing is called for the purpose of the Kill Devil Hills Board of Commissioners to consider Item 1, annexation of lots 3 and 4, Pine Grove subdivision into the city limits. Do you have anybody?
Yes.
Nobody signed up, so would anybody from the audience like to speak?
Can you explain exactly where that is? Because I was in that cul-de-sac and I don't know exactly where the property is.
Mary, if you want to take it.
Yes, ma'am. It's the
Oh,
last
okay.
two properties on the west side of West First Street. In both properties are, we're gonna pull it up on Google Map here, or Dare County. It's the last two properties on the west side of West First Street before you get to the bike path that leads into the Wright Brothers Monument.
Okay.
There's a house on the left side of, the right side of the road. The person who built the house on, the last house on the right owns the property lot, 3. And the property lot 4 is just past that and it's actually in the bulb of the, it's in the bulb of the cul-de-sac. So it's highlighted there on your screen. And you'll see Wright Woods, you'll see the monument. And it's the last two lots. The lot that is just to the south of it is actually accessed by Collington Road, and that's an unincorporated Dare County. These can only be accessed by West First Street.
So are they going to want to develop it or
Yes, ma'am.
2 houses,
One house.
1 house on 2 lots?
No.
No,
Just
ma'am.
one.
So these
So not one
folks,
lot.
these folks right here in this parcel, they own this
Okay.
parcel of land as well, just to the south.
But they
Okay.
can put a house there if they choose to.
Gotcha.
That's not their intent right now, but they may not be the owners forever, and 2 houses could be put on those 2 lots, yes ma'am.
All
2
right.
houses could be put on those 2 lots right now, they'll just be in Dare County versus the town of Kettle Hills. They're not unbuildable lots as of right now.
Oh, all right.
They would simply be built in unincorporated Dare County versus being built as part of the town of Kill Hills. And what they're asking is to be part of the town of Kill Hills because they're accessed through Kill Hills streets and they need
Gotcha.
Kill Hills water.
All
But
right.
both lots are buildable. As of right now, they just simply aren't in our town.
Got it. Thanks.
They'll get a few more services and we'll get a few more tax dollars. Small amounts. I guess that
Anybody else?
is it, unless somebody else had a public comment about this, this hearing, the public hearing. So I guess that means the public hearing is closed. Do you need to say anything official there, or we just move on to the next item?
You can,
Ready
well,
to vote.
you gotta
We gotta
vote,
vote,
like,
I'm
in
sorry.
terms of closing here.
Yep. All right, so the public hearing is closed. Is there any discussion about this? We'll move on. I'd like to do the honors.
Make a motion to accept the petition for annexation and just read an ordinance to extend the corporate limits of the town of Kettle Hills. An ordinance amending the official zoning map of the town of Kettle Hills to designate the zoning of lots 3 and 4 Pine Grove subdivision as low-density residential and the wastewater easement requested by the Masons for lot 4.
Second that.
Nicely done. We have a motion and a second. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, this is the point where we do regular public comment, where you can comment on any old thing. Is there anyone out there who would like to speak?
No
Oh,
sign-ups.
what's that?
No sign-ups.
Nobody signed up? Anybody interested? All right. Seeing none, we will move right forward. I guess we do not need to respond to public comment as there was none. Yeah, the next item is introductions and presentations. Terry, are you gonna take this for us?
I can certainly introduce them, but do you have the?
I have the goodies.
Yeah, tonight we have 3 people with us that were responsible for putting together the Outer Banks, or OBX Rod and Custom Festival. Got that right, that's the first time I got it right. Richard Quidley and Sarah Ho and Mike Tillett. These individuals put together this event that brought quite a few revenue dollars to the town, to the county. It was a very beneficial event, and this is the 2nd year, right?
Yes.
The first year, they were able to donate about $15,000 to 2 charities in the area. And I think that it's a job well done, and I think that we need to tell them that we appreciate it very much. I know that some of the other board members have some comments they want to make as well. So I'll hush for a minute. How about that?
Super. Yeah, just so you guys know what we're doing here, we've got a resolution of appreciation that says all the things he just said in a kind of whereas format, and makes it nice and formal so that we can appreciate you in this very public and formal way. Anybody else that, I know a lot of you guys took your kids to it, and
Yes, yeah.
you mentioned at the last meeting how much you
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a good time for everybody. Looked like everybody was having fun checking out these excellent cars and the great charities that they benefited. That was really something else. The amount of monies that were donated to those 2 organizations. What was it? Children and Youth Partnership, right? And the Outer Banks.
Dare County Motor Sports Charity Group, yeah.
So, very, very nice. If not just for that, all the entertainment value that it brought. And, we appreciate it. Look forward to maybe fitness and everything.
Unusual year for sure.
How many motels do you guys fill up this year?
Well, I think they were scurrying for rooms.
Yeah.
You know, even with the COVID, most of the ones that we had partnerships with had actually booked out.
Six.
Six?
Yes.
Yeah.
How about that?
Fantastic. Oh, sorry, seven. Forgot that.
Seven?
Seven, yes.
Isn't that great? And in the shoulder season, that's something that we can welcome very much. You get to read the resolutions, I'm not gonna read them.
Well, I was saying, you did a nice job summarizing it. It just says it in that sort of more formal language. Be it resolved that the town hereby expresses its appreciation to the OBX Ride and Custom Festival for a very successful year benefiting local charities, and expresses support and thanks for coordinating and conducting this annual event. That's after you. Nice. Bunch of support to that on the top half. Did you guys want to say anything, or maybe we'll take a quick photo?
I'll just reiterate our appreciation and thanks. Charities have struggled this year to be able to raise money. I mean, it really is a challenging time for all nonprofits in Dare County, and thank you all for really stepping to the plate and finding a fun and responsible way to help kids in Dare County.
It's our pleasure.
Well, I've got some stuff for you to hang on your wall if you're so inclined. And in the COVID days, it's always hard to figure out how to do a photo without getting too close to each other.
Sounds like Photoshop.
That's right, I'll pass that to you.
Thank you so much.
And if you guys want to turn, yeah, we'll come out this way somewhere and we'll come over here. We'll stand comfortably apart.
Yeah, we have 6-foot markers here with the.
There you go. If you stay right over there, we'll be nice and distanced. Otherwise, we'd really upset Facebook.
Thank
you. Thank you so much, Bill. By the way. Those are awesome. We're gonna get some of those.
And on the hotel things, we've got a hotel in Kidover Hills that's almost full for 2021. All right.
Already? Oh,
Wow,
that's great.
already, how about that?
Great.
These guys don't know why they were here tonight, I just told them that they were in trouble. And they needed to bring plenty of bail money.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry, there, 1 second. We do need to make a motion to approve the resolution, which I happily do at this time.
There you go. Thank goodness, we have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second? Of course, a second down the other end. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Great job.
Thank you so much.
And if I may say, we appreciate all the support that's been shown by not only the automotive community, but by the local communities, the municipalities, and the tolerance expressed by the police department. No doubt it was as noisy as Bike Week, but everybody came with smiles and left with smiles, and we appreciate everyone's support.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to old business, we have an appointment to fill on the Community Appearance Commission.
Can we get our bail money back?
No, you ready? You ready? Okay, yeah, that's what I needed to hear. Let me have it.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Martin Dalton to the Kidover Hills Community Affairs Commission.
All right.
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay, and motion carries. Thank you so much for that. Community Appearance Commission, always doing great stuff. We got some announcements about that at the end. I think you've probably seen it on Facebook, a couple of beach cleanups coming up as well as some other things, so we'll make sure to keep that out in public. And all the other great work they do with cigarette butts and everything else too. Next item on old business, next item is moving on to new business. So we have some recommendations for bid acceptance for our 2020 and 2021 street drainage and right-of-way improvement projects. There's you guys, everybody here knows, there's a big process that goes involved in looking at all the streets and all the needs and assessing them with a point scale every 5 years, and they meet pretty regularly. And now is the exciting moment where we hear from the engineers about what's coming up and what we've accomplished over the last few years.
Well, thank you, Mayor Sproul. I'm honored to be here, as always, to make this annual presentation to you for the work program that we have lined up for the fall, winter, and spring. Before I go into that, I want to introduce my associate, Ms. Emily Zeltman, who's with me tonight. She's going to be helping me in all phases of work for the town of Kill Hills from this point forward, and I'm very excited about that. Very talented, high-energy person, and looking forward to continuing to work with her on Kill Hills items. I certainly am not going to read everything that I wrote in the 7-page letter of recommendation. I trust every commissioner's had a chance to read through that. The executive summary is, we started with a pretty ambitious program, and with the various processes that come through a surveying and design program, things got added, things were found that needed to be dealt with. We listened to your growing preference to include sidewalks every time we get a chance, and likewise on-street parallel parking opportunities where we get a chance. And first thing you know, we've got the project out to bids, and even though this was a very favorable time to put work out for bids, and I think we're probably over what it would have cost under normal conditions, saving a couple of $100,000, the low bid still came back quite a bit over what our original estimate was, and requires some additional funding. And we hope you'll see fit to award that. We think it represents good value for the town, although it is a lot of money. There's no denying that. As an estimate, or as sort of a point to underscore what a good value it is, the low bid versus the second low bid is a $400,000 difference. And so this is work that if you didn't do it now, you'd want to do it at some point. You'll never get it cheaper than what you're doing it for right now. I hope that your staff and you have found a way to fund this work. We think it represents good value. We commend it to you, along with our proposal to oversee it, as we always do on your projects. And with that, I think I'll just stand by for whatever questions you might have. I'm happy to burrow down on any aspect of it you like.
Ms. Diaz, would you like to weigh in at this point? Since we have a very fluid budget this year, very unusual
Sure,
year for budgeting.
And I do echo what Pete just said as to the fact that it is work that we know the board wants. There were things that were added based on discussions that we've had at different times, which did raise the amount that was needed from what was actually budgeted. But in discussing it with the finance director, we are comfortable using undesignated fund balance for the remainder of what's needed, which still leaves our fund balance in the mid 50% range with doing that. So our recommendation would be as outlined on the second page of our memorandum, which includes the various appropriations. As you see, the money is coming from all over the place. But it's all coming from where it needs to be. The areas affected by the water department are coming from there. You got POW bill, you got your sidewalk reserves, and then, as I stated, the capital outlay for street construction, and then the undesignated fund balance. So our recommendation would be to approve it as presented, with those bullets that are outlined on the second page of the memo.
Okay, contingencies in there and all that. Yep.
Yes, sir.
And that's
And I might add that we've got a pretty good track record of stewardship on your contingencies. Many times, we'll come in and only use a quarter to a third or less than a half of the contingency allowance, but you never know. Just when you start getting cavalier, proposing some 2% and 3% contingencies, then a big one hits. So we do recommend the 5% contingency, but there's a good chance that we won't be using all of that.
One of the main things it does is it keeps your project moving smoothly without us actually having to come back to the board requesting additional funding, which could cost even more than it would have.
Stopping work is a very expensive thing to do. We get it. I was actually looking for a mention about grants and sidewalks, is that part of this, or is that not a grant situation for that? Okay. But I'm really excited to be able to put some more pedestrian in areas that have such high foot traffic already.
Right, and,
So that's a good sign that you need a sidewalk when people are walking down the road.
and with the street being improved, it just seemed to be the perfect
Right
time
time to do it.
to do the sidewalk.
Already out there with all the gear.
Sure.
We get that water line taken care of at the same time. And then we have a bunch of those left to do, and might as well get it while the roads crew is there. Well, I'm very glad to hear that you were able to figure a way to make it work with the budget. I know that things are changing rapidly this fall as we find out new things each month about the unusual year that is 2020. Does anybody else have any questions about it, or more discussion, or are we ready to, have your questions been answered in there? It's very thorough. I really appreciate, especially that you go into so much detail and the backstory of things we've done in the past. And it's a thorough document. It's easy to read. It's not too, doesn't have too much jargon in it for us lay people. So we really appreciate all the work that went into the document too. They're still scratching their heads over there, so I'm buying time for them right now.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah, me too.
I'm supportive.
Yeah, it was something that we talked about in the, in our retreat that was postponed from the spring. For those who don't know, we did that back in September. We had originally planned to have a retreat in, was it March? March, yeah, right, right when all the meetings stopped happening. So we actually know each other better now, so I think it was even more productive that we got to do it in the fall. But we all talked a lot about bike and pedestrian, and particularly Third Street in particular. You know,
Really
we've
been
all,
talking about it since you were all elected. I mean, it's,
it's something that comes up pretty regularly.
right, we've heard it. We've heard you.
And we, you know, even before Matthew and all the different storms where we've had
Sure.
flooding issues, we've been very proud to be part of a town that's been proactive about upgrading drainage and doing it in the most conscientious and data-driven way. I really like the part we were describing in the 2022 budget we're talking about too in Wrightsville, and how much water is sort of shared by Memorial in that section of town that flooded so badly in Matthew. But floods pretty regular, and lowering the water table in there will help a lot of people sleep better. Next time a storm's coming our way. Take as long as you want, but. You know, when I was growing up here, not growing up here, when I was much younger, let's just say, it seemed like everywhere there was a ditch, and now there's so many new sock drains, and it really improves the look, as well as I'm sure it helps with the maintenance side of it too. We're saving money every time we don't have to go clear out the ditch multiple times throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on this committee, I'm the chair of this committee, and there were a number of, projects that are lined up. That's kind of how it works. We have a future forecast of projects that are lined up, and this was one that was lined up even before I was commissioner or committee chairman. But yeah, all these improvements are necessary. We've gone over it in our committee with everybody over there, Meredith, Cameron, Derek, and Steve, and of course Pete. So we're prepared to. I'm prepared to make a motion to approve of everybody, unless there's no discussion. Okay. So I think the motion would be to accept the bid from RPC Contracting Incorporated and authorize the 2020-2021 street drainage and right-of-way improvement project base bid, including unit price items by, do I need to itemize those? Yeah, for the motion?
If you would like to just make the motion to approve as presented, that would be fine.
Yes, well, motion to approve and accept the bid as presented to these projects listed in their end.
I'll second that.
Alright.
Sound like a lawyer for half.
Yeah,
I don't know.
they're in.
That's good, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. One more chance for further discussion.
I went to Commissioner McAvoy's meeting, and I was very impressed, with not only how he ran the meeting, which I thought was very good, but there was a lot of information that was there, presented and debated and discussed, and I was impressed with the meeting. Very, very informative.
I heard good things as well, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you. It went well.
It's fantastic, yeah. It's a fascinating world. It's one of the things I'm most proud of being in Killable Hills, just being a citizen before I ever got involved in any of this was the organization and the way that whole process has worked for all these years. We have great staff, great engineer on the task, and we're very fortunate in that way. Slowly but surely, we're digging our way out of a bunch of poor streets, and I think if I read the document correctly, a few years down the road, we will have caught up, got that poor list down to 0. And then the annual cost will be even lower because we're not trying to remediate as badly on stuff that's past its prime and needs more work. We'll just be back into resurfacing and that sort of thing. Drainage might be a little bit longer. Keep on working on that. But anyway, so that's discussion. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think one other item before we put this to bed, there was some talk in the document about more formalizing a 10-year plan. We've done sort of shorter things with that. Is that the idea? Do you want to, is there anything you want to elaborate on that?
Well, I know there is a plan. I forget how many years it goes forward, basically 3. Okay, but there's a plan. They've identified the roads, the streets that need the most attention, and that 3-year plan.
The recommendation is 3 years. The plan sets out all the poor streets, all the good, excellent, good, fair 1, fair 2, fair 3, and poor. The recommendation that you see every year come to you tries to give you a 3-year picture of what we're trying to do and budgeting purposes for that. But then the plan itself goes much further than that, and the street evaluation is done every 5 years. And those 5-year evaluations then change the last sheet. In the next item you'll see, it changes that last sheet. Some fair 3s might have moved to poor. Some of those poors will no longer be on poor, they'll be excellent because we've improved them. So those 5-year street evaluations is coming up in 2 years. We'll do another evaluation, and that'll give you a fresh list, so you're narrowing down poor streets. A few might fall back into that, that are in fair 3 condition right now. It depends on what kind of weather they've suffered and how cold our winters are and all kinds of factors, but they go
Sometimes
out.
fair 2s skip right over those fair 3s.
They go out every 5 years and drive every inch of every street in the town of Killable Hills and do a very thorough evaluation. And then that comes back to the street committee, and then they bring that recommendation to you guys.
Yeah, like I said, great process.
Yeah.
And thanks for your work on the committee. All right. Thank you very much, Pete. Appreciate all your hard work on it. Next item is, I lost my place. So the first was the bid acceptance, and then,
Next year.
Next year.
Yeah.
right, the street recommendations for the 2021-22. There you go, sorry, I lost my spot. Okay, jump right in.
Okay. Once again, I appreciate the kind remarks that are made. I'm not known for my brevity, but I like Killable Hills because y'all do stuff. And it's an honor to be part of an organization that does stuff instead of just talking about doing stuff. So in that spirit, we had on October 29th, the Street Improvement and Special Projects Committee meeting, which has been noted, Commissioner McAvoy very ably chaired. Public Services was represented there, and they are the unsung heroes of this. I get to stand up here and, get the kudos, but they're an integral part of that. I've worked for public works departments where they just send you off to do something and you come back 6 months later with a plan and maybe they got a few comments. It's a very interactive process for those guys, and again, it has resulted in one of the better designs that we've brought to the bidding community on the past item. But looking ahead, the project that we actually, a year ago, lined up as being in the on-deck circle for 21-22 is broadly known as West Third Street. And in its original incarnation, it was to bring water main and street improvements and some drainage and a little bit of sidewalk, extending the existing sidewalk out to Creek Street, but basically rebuilding the road and getting rid of the first part of the asbestos cement water main. And we also envisioned and have for some time picking up Seminole Street, which is the second little cross street to the left or south, which is in poor condition and also needs its water main upgraded. Last year, after we had completed the very successful Dare Center drainage, pipe in the front ditch, and before that, all the drainage work at the fire station, which was driven by the water tank, but it also gave us a chance to really build a strong link in that important chain of drainage conveyance. So now we've brought strong drainage from the Lowe's and Public system up through to the ambulance road and across the fire station campus and all the way across the Dare Center to 3rd Street. So we've got strong drainage there, but we realized for all of that strength waiting for us, the extra depth, the extra size, we've still got a nasty problem up at West Durham Street and up around the east end of West Durham and the east end of West 5th. And it's a shame because the solution is tantalizingly close. So what we added in to the base project last year was to do just culvert replacement along the west side of 158, including, of course, West 3rd itself, the 3 or 4 culverts to the commercial sites between West 3rd and West 4th, and then West 4th itself and West 5th. That will get rid of all the bottlenecks. They'll go from bad condition, failing corrugated steel pipes in many cases, undersized in all cases, to new pipes, and also from pipes that were higher than their desirable grade to pipes that were lower and down on grade, which maximizes their ability to stretch and reach a long distance and pick up drainage from a long way away. So that's all in the base package, what we were calling A. Then, with this desire that you've expressed to begin putting some more pedestrian ways in place, I call it, we've got this nice rail of a ladder. The west rail is the West 1st Street multi-use path, and the eastern rail is the sidewalk that we put in on the bypass. Now we need some rungs on that ladder. And West 3rd Street will be the first big rung, or one of the first big rungs. So if we're going to do that, well, do we really want to just stop right there at Creek? Do we want to pat ourselves on the back for a 1-block extension of sidewalk? Well, so the B version of this project, or the A plus B, does everything in A, but it then takes just the sidewalk and the minimum amount of drainage and grading necessary to let us build the sidewalk the rest of the way over to Bay Drive. And then, just to give you the option, I don't know exactly what your funding situation is and what your stretch goals might be. We said, well, the C would do everything that A plus B did, but it would add in just finishing the street improvements, the full complete drainage improvements, and the water main improvements all the way over to Bay Drive. So we would only be messing with Bay Drive once in the next 10 years, whereas if we do just A or A plus B now and we catch C later, it wouldn't be in 3 or 4 years, it would be 7 to 10 years later, but we'd still be back there to mess with them again in 10 years. So we've given you the choice. You know how much money you got, how much you're willing to dip into reserves for, and all of that. but we've tried to be as straightforward as we can with the cost, and you're talking about close to $2 million to do the whole enchilada. And again, that's right now when we haven't even launched the first surveyor. We don't think it's gonna have as much potential to expand because all the extras that we put into the project you just approved are already priced in, but we don't know what the contracting environment will be then. So it isn't, A plus B plus C is a stretch. I know that the staff will have something to say about it. I'll just tell you what my take on it is, and it's this. If you can find a way to do A plus B plus C that's fiscally responsible and which doesn't cause us to have to rob the next project, which would be Wrightsville, that whole 1 mile stretch of Wrightsville with all of the drainage benefits it's gonna bring to that very needful area. If you can do A plus B plus C and then the next year, suck it up and do Wrightsville as well.
Another big project, yeah.
Yeah, it would end up being 3 big projects in 3 consecutive years. If you can do all of that, wonderful. But if you can't, if doing the C part would come at the expense of Wrightsville, then I personally would rather see you do just A plus B. So, no pressure, that's just what I think. Everybody's.
And the C, just to be clear, the C is the upgrade of the supply line pipe, water pipe, right?
Actually, it's more than that, Commissioner. C finishes the whole job. All the water main in West Third is done, all the sidewalk was picked up at B. The road will be overlaid for the entire length. The drainage will be in its final configuration for the whole length, not just the bare minimum to get the sidewalk in. So you will be done with West Third Street for that 20-25 years.
And if you were to say, just on the cost front, aside from the benefit of not touching it twice in a decade, going back a second time adds cost usually. Any back of the envelope on that difference?
Well, ordinarily on a horseback, that is probably pretty significant, maybe $200,000 or $300,000. In this particular case, we had a stroke of good luck. The existing road on West Third Street is not centered in the right-of-way. It's kicked off towards the north side of the right-of-way a little bit, giving us extra room, maybe 20 feet instead of the usual 15 on the south side. So strictly because of that, not because of any cleverness on our part, we've got the ability to put the sidewalk in a position where it wouldn't get messed up by the subsequent work. If we had to all pack it into 15 feet, I would say we might lose $100,000.
You gotta dig up the sidewalk.
So, but in this case, I don't think that, I'm not counting whether next year is a good bidding climate and 7 years from now is a terrible bidding climate. Nobody can know that. But just based on purely engineering factors, there's not going to be a big savings in cost, current year cost, similar market cost, between doing A plus B plus C versus just doing A and B now.
So I guess it's, unless you guys wanted to weigh in, we're curious what Ms. Diaz has to say about the finances, and we'll try to weigh in the importance of, or maybe the higher importance of the following year's Wrightsville project versus the financial strain of doing 3 bigger than average bites off of this whole thing in 3 years in a row. So
Our discussion with at the staff level and our recommendation is that we do not include option C at this time.
Right.
One of the large factors for that recommendation was the fact that the sidewalk could extend to Bay, but not have to be torn up in 7 to 10 years. The back portion of Third Street is not in a poor condition, and we talked about some concerns with bumping that up beyond some of our core streets.
Right.
And then, of course, lastly, I do have a concern as to the financial capability of the town to do 3 projects that large in 3 years. And as stated in my memo, I would really like for us to discuss the Wrightsville project when we do our budget work session in the upcoming new calendar year. Because that is a large project, and it's going to have to be some decisions made as to how we're gonna fund that. Because it's so important, there's no doubt about it, there's no question, as you were saying, with the issues with the flooding. But our recommendation at this point would be to do the engineering for option A and B.
Right, didn't want to spoil this project, but yeah, that's where we're headed.
And the sidewalk fund has we've gone through the capital reserve fund for sidewalks, and that fund will have enough, if the $100,000 is put to it like y'all have done the past several years, there will be enough money to cover the cost of the Third Street sidewalk portion of this from the sidewalk fund, and it will only add about $42,000 out of the street capital reserve fund versus C, which added almost,
Yeah.
well, out of the street capital reserve fund, it added $379,000 out of the street capital reserve fund, whereas option A and B was approximately $42,000 additional out of the capital reserve fund, and the other came from the sidewalk fund, which is capable of covering that at this, if we
Fund it the way we have
fund
in the
it the way
past.
we funded it in the past.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, one way to think about C is it costs you about $2/3 more than A plus B. And about half of that, or about 1/3 is in extra street and drainage costs. And the other $1/3 is in water main costs.
Gotcha. Ms. Diaz made a good point about leapfrogging other roads that might need it more. You end up having the cost of the street in the 20 or 50-year timeframe being higher than necessary if you do that work too early. So there are some benefits to putting it off as well. As much as we like to get everything done when we're out of spot, it is a big fight. So you've read the documents, you've heard the town manager's recommendation vis-a-vis the money. Did you have other?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed this, all of us, in depth on our last meeting. It was really what we spent the majority of the meeting on, or the entire meeting on October 29th. Myself, Ron, Skip, and Billy were there, or on the committee. I think we all wanted, I think it's fair to say we all wanted to see the ABC option done, if possible. Obviously, not knowing exactly financial constraints, and obviously everything is really fluid right now with what's going on. But so in full deference to the town manager and what you have to do on your side to make things happen, we wanted to see that. I think we all felt like we should complete the project, in its completion. I think everybody said that, as far as the committee members. But because I feel like that road, and just from what I sense, it, even if it's not the poorest condition, I feel like it's one of the most heavily traveled east-west roads in the town. It's really, linking it up, first of all, with sidewalks, that's great. Just that by itself is great, because I think that there's a business community there, obviously, movie theater, shopping, and then we have employees walking that road, we have shoppers, and then we just have recreational people heading to the beach, people with strollers, whatnot. It really ties in to what's going on in Bay, which you guys did a great job with that, and the walking that's going on, and the bike riding, and all that. It's really making it more of an open community on the north side of the town. And personally, I feel like, I think from what I hear, it could be a saving to get it all done at once, but You know, I know what you're saying about, I mean, I'm not sure you can guarantee, but you're saying it's likely we don't have to rip up, you know, and that's possible. I mean, I defer to you, of course, on that, but, we would hate to have to, you know, rip up any part of that project 7 years from now or whatnot. So none of us wanted to see, this happen at the detriment to the next project. You know, and if it was possible to have, you know, that project stay intact fully, that was not even a discussion to take away from that next project. But, but the consensus was to try to, you know, complete it if financially possible. So, I know your recommendation, and I think Meredith told me that in the meeting as well, was likely to be the recommendation of the staff. And I personally would encourage you to vote for ABC, but then again, I don't fully understand the finances to the point where that's where I have to defer to Debbie. So I would, you know, ideally I'd love to see it completed. I think it makes most sense to complete it. You know, I think sometimes things like that can cost more money in the end to not complete it. But I think it's a very, very heavily traveled road. It is not a great road. Not necessarily the condition of the road I'm speaking of, but the way, you know, there's bikes, there's cars, there's people walking. And there's a lot of cars. It's really, it seems to be a major hub. Any street with a light, of course, is a major street, east-west. But this one just seems to be, because it's Dare Center, because it seems to be growing in foot travel, bike travel, and of course, vehicle travel.
Anytime you put in sidewalks, you hope that there's the benefit of fewer cars on the road because more people are walking, which
Yes.
makes the road last longer and improves everybody's life a little bit.
And correct me, AB does solve that.
Yeah,
sidewalk.
is in B.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. It's just,
Yeah.
to me, I'm wondering if it makes sense to, you know, wrap up the project complete, or, you know, come back for that difference of money, which is, you know, it's substantial, but I don't think it's
Not
that,
insignificant.
it's not that much either at the same point, so.
Yeah, and it could have been a lot worse had that not had that lucky thing about the thing being off center.
Right. I mean, the difference is substantial. Where you come up with that money to fund the difference of $600,000 or so is, that's what we have to defer to you, is it possible, or is it just something that would create such a pinch that it would not make sense, and you really would be at the detriment of future projects, or, I mean, that's where I obviously have to defer to finance.
Well, I think the point where I have to look at it is there's a lot of other things that the board would like to see in a budget beyond just street improvements. And if we're looking at putting almost $2 million in street and water, of course, obviously the water extension is going to come out of the water fund. It doesn't affect your general fund, your tax base, your tax rate. You know, until I have a little more direction from the board on, are there, you know, is there any willingness to look at any type of tax increase to do some of these larger projects, and continue to do our other projects that you're interested in, the continuation of recreation, and then just the general operations of the town. Obviously, we could spend this kind of money on streets, but then there's something else that's gonna have to, something else has got to give.
The fund balance is not in this
Right.
well.
And it's not that we wouldn't want to see it all done at one time. I think everybody prefers that.
Because this is $400,000 more than the project we just approved, basically, correct? And we just approved
Right.
the ballpark. You're
But
right.
we have to keep in mind that we just took over 400,000 out of fund balance to do the project that you just.
Oh, no, I understand, I'm just
Right.
asking, it's $400,000 more than.
Right, but I can't tell you how much of that's general fund off the top of my head and what's water fund, how it would,
Okay,
right.
but it's not I mean, it is big, don't get me wrong, $400,000 is $400,000, but it's not astronomical.
Do we have to decide this tonight, or can we give another?
Did you, I think you,
Well,
maybe you have something.
Mayor and commissioners and manager, just as a reminder, what is before us tonight essentially is to authorize that West Third Street, some version of that package will be our next street project, and to approve our starting on the surveying and design of it. To try to make this decision, to give you maximum flexibility, we've given you 3 design proposals. One for A, one is the add-on to make it A plus B, and the third one is the add-on to make it to be A plus B plus C. One option would be to let us go ahead and design it all, which the extra to do C is like 46,200 or some such as that. You could do that, and we've got a fairly long design process. It'll take us 6 months or so to get this designed and permitted, maybe 7, and we want to start right away on it. So, we could get going on that, and you could look at your funding situation in more details. Now, I'm also very fine and delighted and honored to just get A plus B, and I'm really become a strong cheerleader for just A plus B. If there's any chance that A plus B plus C would come at the expense of Wrightsville. Steve and Derek will tell you, I love me some drainage projects. I like street improvements too, but I really have been trying to get after the Memorial Wrightsville corridor, and we've done so beautifully for the last 10 plus years or so. My goodness, town staff itself just went out and replaced the culvert at the church just this past week. And so we're hitting it every way we can. And, if you said, let's just do A plus B plus C next year, and then take a little light pass, maybe a $400,000 mini project for 22-23 instead of Wrightsville, I would say, please don't do that.
You need Wrightsville more, yeah.
We need Wrightsville. What if we had a hurricane, a bad hurricane in that fall, and we're kicking ourselves because we didn't have Wrightsville in there hitting for us?
Right, and that's the only reason I kind of swayed the other way. I'm totally with you on wanting to be efficient. I'm an efficiency bug. I really have to be efficient if I can be. The only thing that swayed me back on this was when you really reprioritize and look at all the projects and realize that if it wasn't about combining it with this, the drainage part and the water line part wouldn't even be a priority until 10 years down the road. Then we were like, well, that's really getting pushed up in line. And that is the downside of the efficiency thing. And so I thought that weighed greater and getting us in a good fiscal spot to get to Wrightsville sooner is, I'm very motivated to do that. That is near and dear to me because I've lived through those flooding events there. Makes me realize that part of the C isn't on fire like a lot of these other things. This, 3rd Street, the drainage, the sidewalk, those are really important. Wrightsville, maybe even more important. But these other things can wait, and they don't sound like they're giving us a big cost increase to wait. So, I see how everybody got to the positions that they are recommending, both the engineer, the town manager, and finance department. And I really appreciate all you guys thinking about it, turning it over, figuring out if there's another way. Because sometimes you get together, you come up with another plan, but it's tough because I think the other thing too, we were talking about tax increases. Of course, that makes everybody squirm a little bit.
Absolutely.
But if we were staring down, $10 million of backlog of things that needed to be done last year, then we probably should be looking at either a way to borrow the money or a way to increase the revenue. But when I read the document, I see that we're kind of at the last part of a 10, 15, 20-year plan to make serious investments every year, pay as we go, in a responsible way, and that once we get past these next 2 or 3 big projects, the load gets lighter. It isn't that we've got $10 million. We got $3 or $4 million that we've really got to get done in the next three years. And they happen to be big chunks like that. Wrightsville, doesn't make any sense to cut it into 2 projects. It's better just to get out there, put it all in at once and be done with it. And this is much more of a, would be optional, nice to be able to do it at once. But I don't want to do all the talking. I want to make sure we all are on board on this and see where we get it.
I think you did an excellent summary of that. I favor option B. And I think that the town manager made a valid point that it would, move up that street above some other streets that, just isn't the thing to do. I think looking at the big picture with Wrightsville coming up, I think that we need to be very careful about how we move forward with this, as much as I'd love to do it. As much as I'd love to put a lot of money towards recreation, but we just can't do that, unless you come up with some way to fund it. So, my opinion is option B. That's where I would say.
I've heard too much down here. you
Yeah,
guys?
that's where I am too. A plus B seems reasonable.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, C, I'm like a kid on Christmas that didn't get the present he wanted from the read C, but it makes sense to what A and B for now. Because it is awfully appealing.
Yeah, it's nice to, it has that kind of clean finish.
Yeah,
so you have that feeling of accomplishment. Yeah, so hard to put
But A
that.
and B does as well,
Oh, yeah, it's gonna be-
It's a good, that's a very good,
Yeah, I think that it's gonna be very noticeable to the
accomplishes the main
citizens.
goal.
Yeah.
And, we talked about that even when it wasn't the priority yet, and it's great that it's, come to the front of the line at this point to get that going.
No, definitely. I mean, I agree, I'm glad that from our retreat that we talked about, and we recognized that we wanna open up that, we wanna open up those walking paths, east-west, yeah, B is definitely a good thing too, so.
Yeah, it's a win. And, folks will be excited when they hear about it, I think. That's a big neighborhood, big portion of the people who live in Killable Hills go in and out of that street every day, like you said. All right, well, I think we're running out of air here. I would love it if the committee chair would make the motion, but I don't wanna, finish the topic until we've talked it all the way through.
I'm willing to make a motion, but I may need some help in articulating it. I make a motion that we authorize staff to pursue option B of the street improvement recommendation for 2021-2022 fiscal year.
May I add a little to that?
Please do.
Thank you. You're authorizing the town manager to execute the contract with American Engineering Associates for the desired option, which is option B, for design, engineering, and bidding for the 2021-22 street project and necessary budget amendments.
Good.
I'll second.
Mayor?
Yes.
Just on a very minor technicality, we have sort of alternately called these things A, B, and C, and then sometimes A plus B, and A plus B plus C. I gave you 3 proposals, one for A, one for B, and one for C. And if you just approve B, I'm gonna be sort of hanging out there.
No, they've approved A and A plus B.
It's A plus B.
Option B is A plus B. Maybe it's in the ones and twos.
Option B is A plus B.
Yes, we're good.
Thank you.
There you go. Let's go with color coding next time. All right, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much for your work. And thanks to the committee and thanks to the staff and everybody that worked on this. It is a big deal. It's always a big deal, but it's an extra big deal this year. Both these big projects are really something.
Yes, and thank you for responding to what we were thinking about at our retreat, which was great.
Yeah, really great to see that
Yeah,
take place.
we were gonna bring it back to you with the sidewalk stopping at Creek.
Yeah, no. We have to amend that.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm looking forward to after it's done, doing a little survey to find out how many people use it, because I'm sure it's gonna be used in great numbers. Great numbers, yeah. All right, well, thank you again. The third item on our new business list is an ordinance review for Chapter 153.076 off-street parking and loading.
Hello.
Ms. Guns.
The board asked to review the off-street parking and loading ordinance to examine possible changes that may be beneficial to businesses while maintaining adequate parking throughout town. I'll just summarize a few things that have happened over the past decade, and you also asked for staff's recommendation. I don't know that we're making a recommendation, we're just giving you some ideas of what might be efficient and be beneficial to the businesses particularly. Over the past 10 years, we also, staff has seen that large shopping malls are overparked, and ordinance amendments have been made that reduce parking at shopping centers with multiple businesses. Based on their size, there's a graduated scale of reduction in parking per square foot, or 100 square feet. 200 is 2, 4, and 1,000, I think. And then we also saw that parking was not as necessary at warehousing, particularly warehouses that were used purely for storage. Some warehouses are used for business purposes, some warehouses are used purely for storage, and depending on their use, those parking requirements were also modified in the past several years to reduce parking at warehousing, to reduce some footprint, hopefully. Also allowed remote parking areas for businesses that needed additional parking, that they could expand their parking lot outside of their primary use within 1,000 feet, as long as it didn't go across US 158. This was added to the ordinance. I believe that was actually a zoning amendment request at the time, but staff supported it. We also amended to allow restaurants to allow employee parking to be stacked. 15% of the required parking spaces can be stacked for employee purposes, and this reduces the amount of open spaces that they need. They can do a little bit of stacking. Their employees are there during a shift for the entire time, so that made sense, and that was done. That was probably the most recent one that was done. Also for large businesses that are not multiple businesses, but one, we have a parking reduction schedule based on the number of parking spaces. However, they have to show those parking spaces on the site plan as a reserve area, but it doesn't have to be paved. It was done to reduce pavement versus reducing total number of parking spaces required. In reviewing the ordinance, single-family requirements have shown to be very satisfactory. It's 1 space per bedroom, and it allows for stacked parking. There's no limit on the number of stacked parking spaces that are allowed. It's shown adequate for year-round, and some cases slightly inadequate for weekly vacation rentals, but overall has proven successful. Parking for small commercial developments are efficient. Restaurant parking is also shown to be adequate. However, if the restaurant is popular or has live entertainment, we have found that those parking requirements are actually quite inadequate. And that the board may want to consider an open provision to allow businesses to build on-street parking if possible through their own cost, working with their public services department and town engineer on design, but to make that more of an open option than it is right now. Another thing the board might want to consider is changing to reduce parking for large-scale commercial projects that do not fall under the shopping center, office complex, or warehousing. You also could consider reduction in parking space size. Pete and I have discussed this at length, but not all parking spaces in a parking area probably need to be 10 by 20. You could do some, percentage that were smaller, more compact vehicles, things like that, that would reduce the, area of asphalt that would be required. And the other thing that we looked at was specifically the parking table. And when y'all go to study the parking table, retail is one space for every 200 square feet of floor area. And then there's this weird little thing at the bottom of the first page that says, furniture stores are 1 to 400. That was a request that was made for when Exotic Homes moved to the old, it was a water facility. They said that their merchandise takes up so much room that they have to have a big building to show it, and they don't need 1 to 200, and it's proven correct.
Yeah.
There may be some other businesses you can look at as the type of business, that may need to fall into a category that's not nearly as important as 1 to 200. I would say that some of our, heavily visited businesses need the 1 to 200. Commissioner Gray has mentioned, and we agree, that if you have a business that's majority relying on drive-through, such as a bank, and majority of your business is done online or in drive-through, then maybe that 1 to 200 is overparked for that type of facility. So I would encourage the board to really take a look at the parking table and what businesses that are retail specifically, that may be able to fall into a category that maybe is 1 to 250 or 1 to 300 versus the 1 to 200 for the retail. And again, reducing the number of parking spaces in the larger retail, such as the Kmart's or the Lowe's or something like that, so that the parking areas could be reduced, much like we did with the shopping centers. And that would be staff's report to you, and we're ready to take notes.
Well, I was gonna ask, is there like an industry standard with all this that that things are based on, or is there like, was this something?
Parking is a very, very difficult target.
Right.
It depends on your regional location, we're vacation. So you may have a major parking problem for 4 months out of the year, and then you look and go, why do we have so much asphalt, the rest of the year? So it is a very, very difficult target, and what we try to do is create a what's worked and what hasn't worked, and it is probably the most changed ordinance we have in our zoning code. Because there's no perfect formula for parking.
And it
And
does
there
vary a
never
lot.
will be a perfect formula for parking.
To his question, it varies widely across the state and even more widely across the nation.
Yeah, and really, the restaurant is a huge, if you take a restaurant that's extremely popular or that has live entertainment, it tends to show that it does not have enough parking. They're parking on the street, other people's parking lots, things like that. If you have a straight restaurant, 1 to 100 works fabulous. It is full at the times you would expect it to be full, the lunch 2 hours, the dinner 3 hours, and then it's relatively full the rest of the time. Retail is the hardest one to peg, because they're retail places, and I'll use Walgreens as an example. It's a very, very busy, jack of all trades type store. You get your medicine there, but you can also get pretty much everything else you need there, so it's kind of a one-stop shop, as is a grocery store. But if you get a specialized store that's only a wood shop, it might not attract as broad of a clientele as, said retail, and that's why we've recommended that you really look at the retail list, because I think there's a lot of tweaking that can be done in that to reduce parking, if the goal, which we got the goal was to reduce some of the parking requirements, that we might have a little too much asphalt around town.
the shopping centers seem to be the biggest problem to me, because they're the ones that, you know, they're never full at the same time.
We've reduced our requirements for shopping centers and haven't had one built since it was done.
Right.
So I have to tell you that what you're seeing now is dramatically reduced from what
Exists.
is on the books now.
Okay.
But,
So
in all-
we haven't had a shopping center be built except for Country Deli. And it was a smaller shopping center and didn't fall under the reduction, but it also doesn't have an over parking problem there.
No.
So,
But
that's what I'm saying,
one of
the
stores
smaller-
that mentioned Walgreens, you know, and John, I don't wanna step on your toes, but Walgreens has got a remote parking area in the back that don't ever get used. There's nobody ever parks there.
Yeah, they don't quite ever get to the overflow.
No, we don't. So, and like Meredith says, it's a very hard thing to call, but I think that it deserves some study. I think that, my personal opinion, I think we need to probably kick it to the planning board and say, hey, study this table, and let's see if there's some ways we can reduce it so that we, you know, don't have so much asphalt, that we can create some more open space, or you know, get it more in tune with what we're seeing now. Things change.
and I will give you a small warning with parking, is you reduce parking, you get bigger buildings. It's not going to reduce coverage. That's,
They're gonna cover it to the
they're
max.
they're gonna cover it to the max anyway.
Yeah, well,
And just
it may be.
keeping that in mind, you won't have as much parking, but it doesn't mean that you're
There'll be
gonna
more
have
grass.
more open green area, in new development. Cause
I'm thinking
people are
it's
gonna
part-
develop,
Coverage is the same.
they're gonna develop
Yeah.
as much as they can develop.
And that probably is true.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that we don't need to look at our parking ordinance, cause I agree that we
Tweak it a little
do.
bit. Yeah, I still
But,
see a lot of empty parking.
I don't want there to be an illusion that all of a sudden there's gonna be more trees and grass, because likely just means the buildings are gonna get bigger.
Right, and you know, having been in retail and restaurant business for many years, different years, same business, different parking, different business, same building, you know, different tenant, same
Yeah.
building. You definitely gotta think about every spot, knowing that who's in it now might be a low intensity use, but they're gonna retire one day and someone else will be in that same building doing the same kind of business and have
Wildly
50
popular.
customers a day where the other one had 5. And, you know, it depends on how expensive what you're selling is. If you're selling things that you make $100 a pop, you don't need that many customers as if you're selling a bunch of $2 items and you're making 50 cents on each one.
I think it's worth a look.
And,
Yeah, that's
and
always what
and
we're-
retail, you don't plan for Black Friday.
Right.
And restaurants, you don't plan for July 4th. But you have to anticipate it so that it doesn't cause a safety problem and is detrimental to its neighbors. So,
Right.
there's a
And it
fine
depends on
line.
where you look too, like everybody can think of 5 places that were in a big shopping center that was built in the 70s that seems like, okay, they could probably tear up some of this parking lot and they'll be fine. But then there's also anybody that, you know, I was the president of the Restaurant Association for 10 years, and more of the members of that organization, since they're generally the successful ones, were struggling with not having enough parking and trying to know what to do about that. Because once you don't have it, there's no getting it usually, you know. The
Because you
idea
go
that we
to the
can make it
maximum.
easier to add parking is really important. Side street parking is not something we generally think of putting in our budget, but if a business is successful and they're gonna be there for another 20 years, that they can put parking on the sides of the street, I know that helps folks that are successful. We want the successful ones to stick around, right?
Opening that door for a business to be able to come to us, may be something that you wanna consider, and that's not an ordinance change, that would be,
So when it was done for Captain George's, that was remind us how that was done. Paid for that. That was an exception?
that Captain George has paid for it.
I know they paid for it, but can anybody apply for it, or is there something that gets
It
waived?
it was approved by Public Services. It did not go through the Planning Board of Commissioners.
So that's possible for anybody,
It was,
In conjunction with our,
but yeah, having to go through the same process.
Sure.
Okay, because you mentioned we should make that easier, I wasn't sure what you were trying to say. Is it easy to do now, or?
it's not done very much. I
Sure,
don't
yeah.
know that people think that that's a option.
Right,
Generally.
maybe we need to market it more.
Some places it's absolutely not possible because of drainage
Drainage.
or infrastructure or right-of-way width or, because if you're allowing parking within a right of way, which we're actually adding at Martin Street, you've gotta have the right of way. It can't be partially on private and
Someone's house.
partially on public. It's either gotta be ours or theirs. And so there's constraints within our right of ways, but if it's possible for that to be an open process, it's just an option. And I'm not saying that it's not an open process now, it's just, it's difficult. And a lot of it is expensive that they don't want to,
Yeah.
to spend the
I
money
looked
on
at doing
it.
that behind my commercial building at one time, and if it was just the concrete, it would have been totally, I could budget that. But when you had to put in a culvert, in order to put that dirt there and then put the parking space, it got to be very, very expensive. More expensive than I could handle for a parking space, so. But yeah, it's good that there's options if you're Captain George's.
And I think the options have always been there, it's just a matter of making them, you know, us telling people if they have parking issues, you know.
Hey, here's some options.
Why don't you go to public services and get some engineering done and see if you have options?
Well, I for one, am a big fan of proactively helping businesses, that's good for the town.
Definitely.
Yes.
I Commissioner Gray's idea of letting the planning board take the deep dive into this, I think it's a good idea. We'll see the harm in it, kind of to circle back to what you mentioned earlier. Especially studying that table, it'd be kind of a lot for us to kind of pick away at it in our meetings, let them make recommendations and bring it back to us. What does everybody feel about that?
That's what I would think, let them, study the table, see what they think about revisiting, some of those requirements and see what they come up with and bring it back to us, and then we could look at it. But I think that would be the place to go.
I can tell you, just in modern times with COVID, drive-through usage is through the roof.
Yeah.
It is wide open, and people are using it for non-traditional ways.
Yeah.
So it does help. And I don't think that's really gonna change it, if people are really adapting to that now.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Wendy's doesn't even open their dining room anymore,
Right.
it's all drive-through.
I recently saw a video of I think it was a Burger King concept store where it was 100% drive-through. There was no stopping. It was all, well, like 3 or 4 lanes, you could drive through the building. Yeah, it was something else. But yeah, definitely, tricky when those things come our way, but that might be something that's coming to us someday.
Yeah, so to be clear, this just deals with new development. I mean, it won't, everybody else is grandfathered in, so they won't get to change anything. So,
You'll see people.
so,
building
yeah.
apartments based on-
They will be able to change things. Let's say that someone wants to do an expansion and we reduce parking and they need parking now, but now the parking's reduced, they'll be able to do an expansion without having to add parking.
Okay.
It definitely will.
So that could change, okay.
Of course.
People could,
There are sites already that
Yeah.
have excess capacity that could do more
They can
with.
start
But
building.
yeah,
they can add on to their building,
Yeah, it'll affect new and existing
yeah.
development. You know, if it.
You won't see a difference, you won't see reduced parking in an old building, but you might see an addition without more parking.
I see.
Or you might
Because
see
they
the
have that
addition because they
capacity
don't
use,
have to
because they
do
wanna
more
use it.
parking.
Right, exactly. They won't have to build the
Right.
parking, so the parking lot's gonna stay the same and they're gonna maybe build an addition over 5 or 6 parking
Okay.
spaces.
So
Cause
that's,
they don't need them anymore.
that's pretty big, okay. So it really could have a current effect.
yeah.
Okay, good.
Because it's adding value to those pieces of property for those property
Well, I
owners,
like
that they
that
now
idea
have
too.
more capacity to do work from
I like
business.
that idea too, because I see a lot of empty parking.
Well, I think we've heard 2 or 3 people say they're interested in getting a few more eyes on this challenging topic at the planning board level. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. That was good.
Sounds good.
So by consensus, we can put that in the corner.
Yep.
Yep. Great discussion, guys. I really
Yeah, very good.
appreciate it. It's a super tough topic. I've
It
been
is.
picking that apart for years on the planning board for a long time. We looked at it a bunch of times and, yeah, it's always good to have fresh eyes on stuff, but that is a tough nut to crack all the way around. It's got a lot of sides. Like one of those D&D days.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
He's already taken notes, he's ready to go.
Freshly appointed. All right. Great discussion, you guys. That was fantastic. So that gets us to committee reports. I think there have been some committees. Having some meetings, I know John mentioned to be some. Did you want to start
Yeah,
us off?
I'll start. Mayor Sproul already mentioned this, and I hope everybody has seen it, but the CAC, we met on Thursday, November 5th, and we are having 2 beach cleanups in November. November 14th and 28th from noon, that's ours from 9 a.m. to noon. This Saturday will be at Ocean Bay Boulevard, on the 28th will be at Haven Street. We're asking for anybody, this is a simple beach cleanup, no big event like we normally do with Trash Attack. Anybody wants to just come, and you don't have to exclusively stay in this neighborhood. Anybody's welcome to anywhere in town that they feel really has an opportunity that needs some attention. We'll provide trash bags, grabbers, and gloves. We'll have a dumpster on site where everybody brings back what they collect to easily dispose of it. So if anybody would like to come out, it's a nice thing to do, weather permitting, but it may rain. But, I hope to see some folks there if we can pull it off, and just a simple beach cleanup those days. And it's nice to see the CAC kind of get moving again. We've kind of had to reset like everybody has what they're doing nowadays, and we have some, we used to kind of being at events, participating at events, interacting with people in those public spaces was what we did. We can't do that anymore. So I think there's going to be some exciting things moving forward around tree planting, especially, that could really make a positive impact. Talking about CAC appointments, we got news at our last meeting that Chip Albany, who served as the planning board's designee, had resigned. And my feeling is maybe we really need a planning board designated person to serve on the CAC. Maybe we can take that seat and just open it up to the general public. If there's no one that really wants to serve on this, if somebody's already serving on the planning board, they're pretty busy. They're serving in a pretty big capacity already, and if we have somebody else who would like to serve without the opportunity, maybe that spot on the CAC is a chance for them to do so. Not that not planning board member serving, that's fine, but I just thought the idea of maybe of taking that seat that's designated for the planning board member and maybe opening up to the general public. What do you all think about that?
I like that.
And if you can find someone passionate about it.
Yeah, if somebody really wants to do it, instead of kind of, sometimes in a group you have to coerce somebody to do
Right,
it.
yes.
That increases your involvement.
Now, how was that originally set up?
Structurally, I'm sure
I
that's.
think that had to, this is just my guess, it was,
I think she's got.
Yeah, what we would simply do is bring it back to you at the December meeting so that you could change the section where it's established,
Gotcha.
that it was created that way. That it would be no issue, but I would think you'd want it on an agenda, as an agenda item, and
Let's do that.
Take action, and then-
Everybody agrees.
I agree with that.
and then we could also, in the meantime, do some additional advertising that there's a
On the
seat.
spot.
Right, I'm sure.
Sounds good.
And this is rain or shine, this event, right? I know you said it might rain, but is it technically rain or shine, or you don't know?
It's shy.
It's showing. Is it canceled, do you think?
I'm BJ, it's fingers crossed shine though.
Right,
If it, we'll make a call,
That day.
if it gets so bad that we can't do it.
I got it.
It's 9 to 12, the sun's bound to come out.
Yeah, I mean,
Some of it just
Just give
pick
us
up
a
in the
break.
rain.
yeah, I mean, we plan on being there. No matter what.
It's the old Outer Banks saying, you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. So,
Well, good, we'll think sun for you on that one. Looking forward to being out there, and everybody, share it on your
Social
Facebook and
media,
social media, and we'll get a big crowd out there. That'd be good fun. Socially distanced, doing
yeah, it's a
good
nice
for the
thing to do,
community.
considering social distancing and everything.
Yeah.
Good way to do it. Good example for our kids and all that.
So, yeah.
They like to help out with that. Plus, you might find some treasure.
Yeah, that's
My
right.
wife always does. I don't know how she does.
Cash.
Always finds some sea glass, and seashells.
Gold.
Are there any other committee reports that I'm not thinking of?
We had on October the 21st, we had a government and education access meeting. And we're currently winding down and getting ready to do our report on our funds that we had for this last year, and then we'll be coming up with some recommendations for getting some more money, right, Michael?
Sure.
So, But other than that, it was pretty much routine. And I talked with Cameron, and we're getting ready to send out a memo and an update to the West Side group. We're hopefully going to have a meeting in January, and Cameron has a couple of dates that he's going to include in that memo and get some feedback from the committee members as to what works for them. And hopefully we'll be charging strong, setting out some recommendations and looking at some things for the town. I've got another item under Commissioner's agenda that's going to play into that as well. So, but hopefully we'll have that memo go out pretty soon.
All right. So that probably wraps our committee reports. Commissioner's agenda, I'll let you jump right off since you've teased us with that so already.
I have a proposal.
Okay.
And what I would like to do, I would like to ask the board to consider forming a committee to have some negotiations with, or at least some talks, initial talks with the Nature Conservancy and with the town of Nags Head in reference to Fresh Pond. Kind of trying to get a feel for where everybody's at. I think it's something that, as the chairperson for the West Side Group, is something that we could get moving along pretty quickly. I'd like to have another commissioner join me on that. Commissioner McAvoy has expressed an interest in trying to move forward with Fresh Pond, and I'd love to have this board endorse a committee of he and myself, and also Debbie, if we could tag Cameron and get him to help us on that. My thought is that we can get some information, bring it back to the West Side Group, get them involved and let them look at it, make a recommendation, and then bring it back to this board and hopefully have something concrete that the mayor could spearhead with the town of Nags Head's mayor and try to get it moving. You know, you had made a report that you had talked to Ben Cahoon, and he seemed receptive to hear what was going on. And I think this might move it along a little bit. So that's my proposal, and I hope you all will consider endorsing that committee.
Yep, that makes sense.
Free Fresh Pond.
Well, you know, that's some of the things that we can survey as far as, you know, what we can do there. It would, I know I have my own thoughts, you know, something along a passive recreation type event that would, or area that would incorporate the Nature Conservancy, and, you know, I think we can put something together, I really do.
Well, it'll definitely be an interesting fact-finding mission because there's a lot of unknowns there. There's not a lot of access. There's definitely challenges to be able to enjoy it more, but we won't know until we look around and find out.
Correct.
So seeing some nodding from staff.
I'm excited about it.
Everybody's nodding up. You got my wife called the Bobbin Club.
Okay, we got the Bobbin Club. Okay,
Bobbin
cool.
Club.
Thank you.
That sounds good. Great idea.
We'll keep you guys apprised of what's going on, and Commissioner McAvoy and myself will get together with Cameron, and we'll set up some initial meetings, and we'll keep you guys informed.
Yeah. Feel free to reach across the town line to folks that are in that neighborhood and on the other side of, on the Nags Head side.
Okay.
You know, I think all elected officials down there want to hear from their own constituents. So
Sure.
which way the wind is blowing on that sort of thing.
Yes,
'Cause
sir.
you never know what people think until you ask them. I guess.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you very much.
Good, yeah, well, good job with that great idea, and I hope it's very fruitful.
Cool.
Yes, we'll see what comes out of it. I guess we will go left to right for the public.
I have nothing on my agenda.
All right. How about over here?
Nothing this evening, Mayor.
Has you haven't had a meeting with,
We haven't had a board of tourism, we have, it's next Thursday,
so it's next
so,
Thursday.
yeah.
Gotcha, so that will be an interesting one
So
too.
the last, yeah.
Never a dull moment over there.
I got a few things. First off, I'd like to thank Meredith and Cameron. They made quite a bit of time for me Wednesday of last week. We talked about a lot of stuff. It felt like it was a very positive and productive meeting. Many of you'll probably remember the email we got back on October 15th from Daniel Lewis and the Restaurant Association. I feel like there really is a crisis for help. And we had a really good long talk at our retreat about housing. I kind of just want to take a little bit of time here to pick back up on that. And maybe talk some more options we could have to help address this situation. Just a few notes I've taken that we could talk about. One is putting multifamily dwellings back in residential low zone. They were there up until 2018, been removed. We could reduce lot sizes for duplexes in the residential zone, or make accessory dwelling units easier to have in the residential zone. And there's other options, those are just the ones I'm throwing out. But, I'd like to see us kind of pick a path we really go down it. Or something we can do to try to address the situation. So, what are some thoughts that, everyone has on this board and what we may be able to do? We've done a lot of talking, but I don't think we've really kind of picked that right avenue to journey down and see if we can do something yet.
That's a great topic. Raise your hand or just
Just
hold your pen up, okay,
Yeah.
got my attention. Think about that. Yeah, it certainly is probably one of the hottest topics in Dare County politics for many, many years, and I think I not speak for everybody to say I'm tired of hearing people say we need to do something, rather actually think of some things to do, yeah. So you've heard me talk a good bit about land trust, ability to, at a more county or multi-county level, put some of the land in a nonprofit so that it can be separated from the property, so that those properties would be below market, if you will. But if you bought that house, you rented that house, you wouldn't have the benefit of riding the sand up as it doubles and triples in price over the next 20, 30 years. But in my opinion, if we don't set aside some portion, some percentage of the property, and not just in our town, but all the towns and in unincorporated areas, that we will really get ourselves into the problems that you see in ski towns, where people are driving 2 and 3 hours to do a job. We already have that happening, and the only way we're gonna do is to either buy and control it, which is astronomically expensive, or find some nonprofit way to just keep it from accelerating price going forward. So I've been talking about this for a number of years, and it definitely seems like I'm getting a lot better feedback more recently. I had a meeting with, and I was gonna say this in the mayor's agenda, but we'll blend it all together. I met with Mayor Cahoon and his staff and a few other people. They actually had a first meeting with this group back in March. It was actually the first socially distanced meeting before masks. We all just sat far apart. It feels like March 12th or something like that. And we're all like, okay, we're in a meeting. But we came back and revisited. It's a group that specializes in J1 housing and tourism markets. So they're from Wisconsin Dells area, big water park area, small town, similar size to ours, with 5 water parks in it. But they worked out a way where over the years they built bike paths to all of these attractions, and by the time they had used up, every motel had been converted into student housing, everybody's garage and everybody's mother-in-law's apartment and every spare bedroom, they said, well, we're really running out of options here. So a developer in the town came up with a plan, and it was pretty unique. But the idea is that we would create special arrangements. It's technical, but they have all the background on how to do this, so that you could make a property have different rules than everywhere, like a spot zoning sort of thing, or a covenant, or I don't know what all the technical rules are. Don't quote me on any of these words, but I could point to the people who are talking about it. But anyway, the idea was that they built, what they did in Wisconsin was they built dorm style specifically for J1. The requirement was it had to be used for J1 and nothing else. But because it was for J1, it would have 4 beds to a room, very small, compact, bathroom down the hall, sometimes private bathroom, but then like a common area for a kitchen, common area for socializing and that sort of thing, all gated and separate just for that community. And the genius of it was, besides being really efficient in space and having the communal areas be more efficient, there was no parking requirement. So the parking, they had one building that had, we're not gonna be this big, but they had one building complex with 1,400 students in it and had 10 parking spaces. But it had 1,400 bicycle spots in a gravel lot. So they really got the cost down. They got it to $125 per student per week. So that's just one component. Here we wouldn't have one central location, but we need to sort of spread it down. But we are exploring those options with NAG's Head, and they are doing some work on it, and will report back to us, and I'll keep you guys informed on that. So we've got the ownership side, we've got the rental side, and then we talked about the couple of ideas that you mentioned about, what is maybe we need to reach out to our citizens again and see what their temperature is on ADUs. That seems to be a moving target. Some people, very keen on the idea. Obviously, California has been doing it for a couple of decades, and it's allowed people to stay in their home by being able to rent a small portion to someone else. We have challenges with septic, but there's new technology with septic. If you can swap out your septic for something that's more compact, you might be able to put a small ADU on some of these lots. Cameron and I have talked about these things a couple of times. It's challenging, it's technical, it's challenging. But we also need to know that the public is along for the ride on that, because there's certain people who think ADU is the end of the world. There's it's a terrible thing. But I think we all just need to keep talking publicly about the challenges that we want our kids and the next generation to be able to get started on the Outer Banks. I think all of our generation sort of feels like we might be the last people that got in, because it's so hard to get in now, to get a foothold here, and so many people are just saying, I can't do it, I've got to commute from Currituck or Edenton or somewhere, just to live a little bit of the dream life out here with the surplus of jobs that we have. We have more jobs than people, and not enough places for people to lay their head at night, because we can't really tell people that they can't use their property for an Airbnb, and if that's the highest and best use, we've got to come up with strategies that will go in the other direction. So I feel like I've been monologuing too long, but definitely want to keep the conversation going, both at our meetings, but also in between meetings, and encourage you guys to look around like I have been for many years, to see other tourism markets and how they've dealt with it, both now and in the past. I often tell a story about going to Steamboat Springs, Colorado, where they required big box retailers that came to town to provide housing for the number of people that they think they're going to hire, at a ratio, some sort of, had to be affordable at the so many percent of the median income. So it slides up with time as the numbers change. So there's a lot of things to get into, and we could probably talk about it all night, but if you guys wanted to give a couple minutes, or you want to take it to a,
Well, let's just,
throw
Well,
out some ideas. What do you think?
I'm concerned that, especially how many working class folks we have living in our town, people who have lived here for years are getting priced out of living here. So they were already here for years, and they're getting pushed out. So not only do we have that problem with the J1s, but we also have the problem with all these people that have lived there for a long time, and they're working in our restaurants and our retail places, and doing every small job, and working really hard, and then they can't afford to remain. So I mean, I think, the multifamily dwelling situation, I think would be a way to, maybe make a small dent in that. Like I said, I'm really concerned about those people, because I think those are the people that, man, they're getting disenfranchised. They've actually lived here, they paid in, they've done all, and they're really getting, like, they're gonna have to move out of the county. So in looking at the reason why that was originally passed, what the legislative intent was in passing that, in the prior board.
In 2018.
In 2018, and then, okay, does that still make sense, does that, or what was the real reason behind that, or what was the reason behind that, and why would we continue to restrict that, so, yeah.
Do we know what that was?
Yeah,
In 2018?
I didn't support that.
Yeah, it was a split vote.
Oh, I see. It
I
was
didn't,
supported by the people who are no longer here.
Correct.
yeah, I didn't support taking that out.
And also my question about that too is how many properties would that impact? I mean, is that,
The entire west side of Killable Hills.
Right, okay.
So,
So any new development or redevelopment
yep,
in the
it
residence,
could be
okay.
back on Bay Drive, it could be in any of the neighborhoods that are on the west side of US 158. That is our residential zone.
Because for me, that solves a problem for a few years from now or 5 years from now. But you and I have talked about this. I'm not sure how I feel. I'm a little bit more hesitant probably about that because as always my issue is I think about density and how and I just think in 15 years from now and 20 years from now, how dense do we want it to be and how many people can we handle before we have to start really looking at some infrastructure. We already see our internet can't handle the people that are living here. That currently just can't. And so as we see more people coming here, working remotely, that kind of thing, I think just looking at one thing is fine, but I'd like to see us look at everything that's involved with increasing, any kind of population increase is important.
Right, yeah, people often compare us to how it used to be, but also other places say, well, such and such used to be like we are now. Like, you could look in both directions, Florida back at other communities. There's some places in Florida where their taxes are double what we pay because they tried to protect certain areas whose taxes were going up too quickly. But then that just shoved all the tax burden onto the folks that came later, and you got rid of one problem, created a whole new monster. And you end up with like a little brick rancher next to a 50-story condo. Of course, we're not going to see that here. Not some really quick. But yeah, I take your point that there's that balance between density. Density is your friend when you're trying to work on affordability because the price of the sand below it is what's driving the cost. And at the same time, when you talk about what are we going to have later, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, there's that house on Airstrip that is sort of regular old west side lot size, but maxed out in the way that beachfront lots generally are. That doesn't happen in the neighborhoods that much. That was one of the first ones I'd seen in my neighborhood. But when I looked at it, I realized, yep, it's got all the setbacks. It's maxed out, but my house is not maxed out. And none of the houses on the lots on my street are maxed out, but 20, 30, 50 years from now, if the lot is $300,000, you could see that all those houses would go away and they would all be maxed out, and the place could hold twice as many people as it does right now, triple if you look at the undeveloped lot. So that's coming anyway, but that's why I keep coming back to that, how do we take the land out of the equation? If we could say our goal as a community is to take 20%, that's ambitious, 10%, 20% of the lots over a 20-year period and take them completely out of the market, and they are only for folks that are at the beginning of their career, at the, when they're young, when their income is low, at the first part of their career, that gives them a foothold in. And you can then, if you're buying, you might not be flipping the house to make a bunch of money, but at least you're not paying rent anymore. You're saving money for that market house that you would buy second. I think it's got a lot of legs, but it's going to take a lot of stakeholders, a lot of buy-in from a lot of people a lot smarter than me, bankers and lawyers, and the buy-in from the generation ahead of us that is retiring now, that wants to make a mark on the community and really find a way to make a difference. We need to get all those folks together. So I'm just going to keep preaching that one from the rooftops until I get a crowd of people going in the direction.
Well, how much of a change would this change make, I guess, like, if we were to change the rule, and we were to change back to what it was on multifamily, how can we even put our hands around how many?
It all depends on what people, it's hard to quantify because someone could come in and have a lot big enough to support a triplex or quadruplex, but they may make it all Airbnb.
Right.
They have that option, we can't.
Right.
But at least we're giving homeowners the options to do different things with their house that potentially address the problem.
Right.
And so it just gives us another tool in our toolbox to, work on this. That's not here now. Accessory dwelling units, I believe Kitty Hawk passed a ordinance to allow them. hasn't been a terribly long time, so it's kind of hard to quantify the success of that yet. But, that could be something we could study as well to, maybe try to make more available in the residential zone. If no, there's a lot of avenues to take.
Yeah.
My goal is we pick something and go for it, if we've,
So as long as it will make a dent,
Yeah.
I think.
or a couple of things to go for them, it really, Mr. Lewis was right, we need it. The business community and our working class folks are in a bind. And, I'd really like to see us do something about that.
Yeah, I did that, but then the only thing is, what's the adverse effect, I guess?
Right.
Does it make a big enough difference, I guess? But yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you, as far as something needs to be done, and I'm with a lot of people that are already here that can't afford their rents are going up, and they're gonna get, I don't know where they're gonna go, so, yeah.
It's a quality of life issue too, that, I spent a lot of years pretty broke. Lived with a lot of people, because that's the only way you could afford it, to have, 6 kids in a house with 3 bedrooms, or whatever it took to stay on the Outer Banks, we would do that. But if you're, a young couple and you want to not be with a bunch of other people, we do have a very small amount of inventory when it comes to 2 bedrooms or 1 bedroom. There's just not a lot of that out there. And when you do it and it's required to be the only house on the lot, it's gonna make that 1 bedroom even more expensive. The only way you can get 2 bedrooms developed is apartments and multifamily abilities.
Well, out of convenience for time, would the board feel comfortable if we asked staff to look into maybe loosening regulation on accessory dwelling units? I don't know if you mentioned you'd like to get some more public impact feedback first. We're just looking into it publicly as people can kind of chime in. And maybe also looking at reducing lot sizes for duplexes in the residential zone, make it a little easier for them.
So it's 15 versus 20, is that
Meredith, we have the numbers.
What else?
15 versus 20,000 square foot lots for
There's all kinds of things you can do with that particular thing, and when you're talking about accessory dwelling units and duplex, you're kind of speaking the same language almost, it's just whether it's connected or
duplex by a
disconnected.
different name. Yeah.
And we would definitely be able to look at some lot size changes. Again, sewage is gonna be an issue, but,
Have you talked to folks in Duck much? I know they changed to have an ADU rule a few years back. If a lot been built, I haven't heard anything about that.
I don't know about Doc, I know that Dare County did it, and they've had a few, it's pretty restrictive as to where they are allowing the accessory dwellings. But they've had a few. And in our conversations with John, and I'm surely not gonna keep this longer, is that even if an accessory dwelling unit is built and is used as an Airbnb, you talk about the young couple that wants the 2-bedroom house, it offsets their mortgage so that they can afford a house. So even if you have an Airbnb that's your accessory or the other side of your duplex, you're helping that person stay in their home by offsetting that mortgage cost because they can use
Making
more
it
of their
affordable by
land.
showing them some income.
So you're making it affordable for them in a different way than trying to reduce the cost of the sand underneath the structure.
Right.
So it is actually a really good option to look at for workforce. They go, well, everybody's gonna Airbnb, it's not gonna be used for workforce, but your workforce is then able to live and purchase a house because they can get that assistance from offsetting that through the vacation area that we live in. And it's a very good option for workforce.
Right, and it allows folks of modest means to get into the tourism game when usually it's only somebody who can afford a $500,000 rental house. You can do it for a fraction of the price. So it allows more access to the biggest business in town.
So,
Yeah, we'd
and
like
that's
to
the
look at
direction, the
it.
board will be happy to look into it and report. Do you want us to report back to you or go to the planning board?
Let's go back, let's see if we wanted to do.
Okay.
I think come back to
Make
us.
sure we're on the right track before.
And I also would like to add that, we haven't talked about it a lot tonight. Meredith shared ideas about reducing lot size for duplexes. That also should be brought back to us. See how those things go, and then based on that, we may go down other options. But for now, this is 2 solid steps in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, something to look at. And I'd encourage any of those folks out there that are writing for one media outlet or the other, that are listening to us on YouTube or Facebook or wherever they always seem to tune in somewhere else if they're not here in the room in COVID land. But yeah, look, we'd all be curious to know how it's working in other places, ADUs in particular, because I think there could be a lot of fear about something new, but if we can find some success stories elsewhere, we can sell this idea for what we, I guess, seem to be seeing it as a great benefit on a bunch of different levels.
If we're able to close this conversation out, I got 2 more agenda items. I'm gonna do them real fast.
No worries, these are ideas, take your time.
I was approached by a local business owner, a restaurant owner, who is really seen a big jump in delivery of meals. And they were having trouble, especially on the OIR, Ocean Impact Residential, and in a lot of the rental properties, seeing the house numbers. In the oceanfront, a lot of times you have really extremely long driveways, houses are not well lit. Sometimes the rental properties will have a sign on the front that shows the house rental number, but not the actual street address number. And it can be terribly confusing for even our FedEx and UPS drivers, and for, could be even for taxis and ride sharing services. So Meredith and Cameron shared some ideas. How can we make it just easier for people in the delivery business to clearly see the house number? I mean, it's a safety issue too. If somebody had to call the fire department and they're rushing to find that house that has a fire, and that house is not well identified, it could make a big difference in getting to the right place where they need to be. This is a big issue that could do some good, but how can we, I don't have the answer to the question, but how can we just make it easier to identify, these homes easier to identify for delivery services, for first responders, for everybody?
I got 2 ideas for you. One is, remember I don't know if it's still there was a program where they were making the little metal.
Yeah, because in the fire department, you can put the little metal
They still have
reflector.
that?
And that's the best way in the world, because they light up.
Yeah, when you drive by, they're
Yeah, they reflect.
Yeah.
Commissioner Winley and I had a discussion, and I had taken it to department head agenda team meeting. We're actually looking at a couple of different things. Rachel is looking on years and years ago, we did a big public service announcement as to how important it is for you to be found. You know, can you be found? Pizza, UPS, and all the things.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fire and rescue. We're gonna. She's working on that again. It's gonna highlight what the fire auxiliary will do, and it's very reasonable.
It is
I can't
very.
remember I know we have one in our house, and you can see them. They do light up really well.
Coming down the road,
So we're gonna promote those, and we're gonna do things on the bottom of the utility bills again, reminding folks. When our different departments go out for whatever reason to a house, just mentioning, we want to do it with a gentle hand, as a kind, we don't want to be, it does speak to penalties, but we really don't want to go in that direction. So each time somebody's out there and they notice that there's not a house number or that you can't see it, just reminding people of how important it is and how easy it is to get one that can be seen at a very reasonable cost.
How expensive are these reflective street signs that we're talking about?
Chief, what are they?
I can't remember.
$20? Yeah, I think 20's right, yeah.
$20.
No,
Yeah,
yeah, a little bit
example
of money
now.
too.
They're about this big.
And it helps the fire department.
I want one.
Yeah, I need one now.
Yeah, me too.
My house
Send
is
me.
dark.
That's
I had
what
one
told
put
them
on-
would
I had
be.
one put on my mailbox.
And her.
Yeah, I feel
Take
bad
it
about
out,
this.
put it on
This is
there.
the last time they were
We're
advertising that.
gonna get that out and get that rolling, and we've kind of all brainstormed what some of the things are we can do to help the delivery folks.
I have seen in other communities too, this might not be a good fit for us, but in areas where the houses are really close together is the one I'm thinking of. They painted the number of the house and the apartment right next to the white line on the street. So even though you don't really notice it when you're driving by, if you stop and look down, there's the address. And it was just a little stencil, white, 4 inches tall. something an Eagle Scout might do for a project.
Yeah.
But we'd have to be okay with painting on the road, and I don't know what DOT says about that stuff, but, just a thought, just a thought. And, you know, the same thing too, I would donate to a cause that would help people buy them that want oceanfront on, maybe not, but, you know, in the neighborhood, sure. Maybe if they offered $50 to buy one for yourself and, you know, get a discount for 2 or 3 other people, I would do that too.
Well, speaking of Eagle Scout projects, good segue to my last comment. We had the email about the bike rack at early voting. I passed that along to Troop 116 here in town, and the Eagle Scout candidate accepted it. So I will be putting this young man in contact with staff as needed to build that, and maybe do some other things to promote bicycling in town. He was very happy to do it because so many nonprofits shut down. Like, he's like, what am I gonna do for an Eagle project? He couldn't find anything to do. So the timing for this really worked out well.
Nice. Cool little engineering project, and love to go biking. Put my bike next to a tree. Better to have a little place to rack it up. That's fantastic. Great stuff there. I appreciate it. I think that means my turn. The mayor's agenda, I'll try to keep it short since we're running on. Wanted to mention that we got word, you probably saw an email that, but for the public's sake, we were just informed that the town's land use plan update was certified by the state of North Carolina. Yeah, got that. Good job. Congratulations on a job well done. It was a long slog getting that done. I appreciate all the staff did for that. They really kept the torch going through the challenging times. Let's see here. I wanted to thank Public Works and everybody for the quick response for that set of steps that was unearthed by the last storm. It was a step that was probably 2 feet below the surface of the sand for the last decade or so, and it wasn't the same height as all the rest of the steps. So a citizen brought that to our attention, and within 12 hours it was already fixed, right? So I think that they're looking at doing a wholesale replacement of that and running the steps since it's longer, and who knows how deep the piling is in the ground now that it's 4 feet lower there. That sand may all come back in a week, but you know, that's just the nature of the beast on beach accesses. I meet pretty regularly with, virtually with all the other mayors and Bob Woodard and folks from the county. I think we're in the range of 60 meetings since March for COVID-related stuff, which is was at one time every single day, and then it was a few times a week, and now we're down to every other week. So that's a good sign that we're doing a bunch of normal stuff, but occasionally check in on that. And I just wanted to share that Sheila Davies always gives us an update, and the things that she said about the preparedness of the state and the local health department in terms of plans for when the vaccine gets here and how it will be distributed. Sounds like it's a really well thought out plan, and that they are very optimistic about the timing of it. We can be sure, but relatively shortly that might be beginning. So they of course have a whole system for who gets it first, and us regular folks will be last in line, but we definitely want to get healthcare workers and folks with underlying health issues, children, and all sorts of things first. But they've got that well thought out. There are national guidelines, but all the states are doing it a little bit differently. So a lot of, again, smarter people than me have figured out a good plan. And I just wanted to share that there are a lot of smart people thinking about these things and are getting us prepared for the next phase we're all hoping gets here sooner rather than later. I mentioned about the J1 housing. I wanted to say just as a back end of that the conversation was about that J1 project, but Cameron and I were at the meeting that there was a lot of talk about the other ideas, and we definitely want to in tandem work with other towns, the county, and on all of the different housing challenges that we have. J1 is one, year-round rentals is another, year-round ownership is another. Businesses and their role that they might be able to play in investing in one project or another, or one concept or another, is a well that has yet to be tapped. So that group is going to talk to the staff members down there. We're going to talk to some of their biggest employers of J1s on that side, but also just doing, the county's doing assessment of need. They have ambitious targets for how low they think rent could go. I think if we just set the target that anybody could lower the rent by $100 for a wide swath of people is better than having a few really low price places for a few people. So hopefully we have a broad plan there. I thank you for bringing that up. All right, I think I have run out of, just wanted to mention the cleanup again, 14th and 28th, and then we are on to the town manager's agenda.
No, sir, nothing this evening, thank
All
you.
right, the town attorney has left us, so his agenda is in the ether. Tell us about the consent agenda.
Yes, sir.
real quick.
Just a few items. The minutes from the October 12th, 2020 meeting, the monthly report from September 2020, approval of the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality grant for Phillip Hills Shoreline Protection Project, substantial grant for the town, over $1.4 million. Also, we've received notification of our Moore Shore Estuarine Access Grant approval, which requires tax certifications and an addendum to the Board of Commissioners Conflict of Interest policy. Approval of the consent agenda will report the board's approval of this item, the no overdue tax certification, and the addendum to the Board of Commissioners ethics policy, and staff recommends approval of the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
I'll second that.
We'd like it when we have a motion and a second right off the bat. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. One last item that I forgot because it was typed up rather than my hand scribbled was, we do have just a little over a month before we're going to have the first ever fireworks in December. So I just wanted to touch base on that. I think we have a plan in place, but I just, in case somebody had changed their feelings about it, we had talked a month or so ago about going forward with the 17th. I know we've had staff talking with folks at both the Park Service and the other associated, right, flight, there's a bunch of different
First Flight
organizations.
Society.
First Flight Society, there's another one too. They are working together to really make the most of it. Hopefully we can leverage it into some good earned media and some good warm fuzzies from our citizens and anybody who's brave enough to come out to the Outer Banks in December, which is more than ever this year, I imagine. And hopefully we will have I know that we will have a nice public messaging about being responsible and social distancing. This is not a gathering, this is a thing in the sky, you can watch it from all sorts of places. So, but I did want to bring it up just in case anybody felt differently, because we have another deadline. We either tell them it's a go, or we lose more money, so we're still a go?
Yeah.
Still a go. All right. We'll have that to look
Excited.
forward to,
I've
yeah.
been hearing
I think
more
it's
and more
neat,
people talk
yeah.
about it,
Yeah, we have to remind everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're working on some special possible ways to broadcast it and possibly even project it in other places. I don't want to get too much into it to jinx it, but if it works out, it's going to be super cool. So hopefully we'll have some announcements about that in the next.
Rachel's working very hard with other organizations on really making it special.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
so we've got some video and hopefully ways for you to be able to see it from lots of different places. Super excited. So we have one more chance at public comment. If anybody's still awake in the audience and wants to make the meeting longer. No, just kidding. Please speak up if you'd like to speak. No response to public comment, and I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you.
Good meeting.